So that means the amp is authentic to the right era.
Now, anything else jumps out to you that can help me authenticate this to James Jamerson?
It says James Jamerson on the side. It's possible somebody could fake a thing like that, but it looks like that's been on there for a long time.
The amp is from the early 1960s, when Jamerson was almost completely unknown to a popular audience. He didn't really get full recognition for his music until long after his death. So would someone really fake a stencil at this point in his career, or even a couple of decades later?
If anyone could recognize whether this amp belonged to James Jamerson, it would be someone who played alongside him, like one of the Funk brothers.
I've gotten in touch with Dennis Coffey, another member of the Motown Records studio musicians.
Usually there are about 12 of us in the studio. Our job was to read the music, add some kind of feel, because you can't write the feel on paper. We had to add a great feel to it.
What was it like to play with James Jamerson?
James, to me, was just the best bass player in the world. And you could hear it.
Dennis found a recording for me. It's from a late 1960s Detroit club gig, which sat in his drawer for 25 years.
You can hear Jamerson doing pure Jamerson, okay?
James Jamerson, let's give Jamerson a round of applause. Very beautiful James.
Always laying down the groove, but then he'd stretch out. He was always laying in that pocket. That's what the guys in Motown were so good at. It was always about the feel and laying that pocket down. That's what drove those records.
The Motown musicians were in high demand. In the early 70s, Berry Gordy moved Motown from Detroit to LA, where a select few of the guys worked harder than ever.
I remember getting to the studio at 10 a.m. in the morning and bouncing on sessions up and down, and I didn't get home till 4 a.m. the next day. So that was my first day doing sessions and playing guitar at Motown.
I am trying to determine whether this amplifier right here belonged to James Jamerson. Can you tell me anything about this?
The only thing that I can tell you about that stencil is if you look on my amplifier, I have the same stencil.
Steve has got to hear what Dennis tells me next.
Steve, how are you? It's good to see you. I gotta tell you, this has been one heck of an adventure.
I explained that although a music store identified it as the same model Jamerson bought, his son certainly wasn't convinced that this amplifier had ever belonged to his dad.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what I had until funk brother Dennis Coffey came to my rescue. In Detroit, in an earlier era, musicians hauled their own instruments and gear. But Los Angeles was a much larger city and studios were further afield. So cartage companies transported musicians' equipment around town.
And they showed up with the trunk with my name on the outside of the trunk, and this amp had my name stenciled on it. They got to run in and instantly identify whose amp that is and look in their schedule and say, well, okay, Dennis Coffey is over to this studio, and Jamerson might be at a different studio. I'm assuming this Royal Ink was probably maybe the warehouse or something, but Studio Instrument Rentals did that, and if you notice, it's the same type of stencil.
He believes that we may have uncovered a piece of music history.
This is the amp I used out in L.A., and that's the one that Jamerson used in L.A.
Take a look at that stenciling right there.
Very interesting.
Look at that. There's his name right there, and it's a pretty good match.
That's pretty amazing.
It's not the smoking gun I'd love to be able to have, but it's pretty good. It's the closest I can get.
That's close enough for rock and roll. That's pretty good for me.
I've got a surprise for you.
Oh, I love surprises.
I'm giving Steve a ride to a one-of-a-kind jam session. Gentlemen, this is Steve Fishman. He's an enormous fan of early Motown. Dennis Coffey and James Jamerson Jr.
How you doing, sir? Nice to meet you.
Can we sit in?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, thank you. In 2000, 17 years after his death, James Jamerson was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Steve plans to loan this amp to their collection.
On the next History Detectives.